Now, the African Green Revolution Forum in Nairobi is being dubbed the biggest agriculture campaign in the continent's history. More than $30 billion has been pledged towards the sector. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta, USAID, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the African Development Bank are among those who've announced their financial commitments. The forum has attracted more than 1,500 influential figures who are spending their 3 days this week brokering new agricultural initiatives. The pledges are expected to increase production, income and employment for smallholder farmers and African agriculture businesses over the next 10 years.
If we continue at this pace, even in 2020 will be $800 below what we are supposed to be at in terms of per capita income. So we need to do things differently. And today we thought that the best way we could do things differently was to get everybody in the room, our heads of states, our development partners, our private sector that is really moving and moving very hard, to talk about how do we seize this moment for the agriculture sector.
So today, let us make that commitment specific. And I propose that we pledge to mobilize at least $400 billion of public and private sector investment over the next 5 years. With goodwill and partnership, this is more than possible, and I believe we can make it happen.
Now, joining me in the studio to discuss more about this forum is Boaz Kezire. He's the head of policy and advocacy at AGRA. Welcome to the studio, Mr. Kezire.
Welcome.
Now,
Thank you.
Of course, this forum, like we mentioned, it's been dubbed, one of the greatest forums in agriculture on the continent. We know you're talking about advancing policy and, of course, securing investment. As we mentioned earlier, $30 billion US dollars in terms of investment pledge so far. Now, AGRA also says it plans to invest about $500 million US dollars in Africa's agricultural sector. Looking back, what are some of the wins you've achieved so far this week here in Nairobi?
Let me start by first congratulating our leaders represented by His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya and joined by His Excellency President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, but also more importantly, the chairman of Econet Wireless, who's also the chair of AGRA board.
Right.
These specific leaders mobilize the global community, the philanthropists, the scientists, the researchers, to converge here in Nairobi to make these unprecedented commitments.
Right.
This is the first time in the history of Africa's agriculture, because the last time leaders met and made this kind of commitments was in 2009 in L'Aquila, Italy, when at the G8 summit, when leaders met and considered the 2008 food crisis. They made pledges of up to $22 billion US dollars to respond to the global food security, not Africa alone.
Right.
In this particular case, $30 billion were committed. In L'Aquila, out of the $22 billion, 6 was new money.
Right.
In Africa, just for Africa alone, in this particular big conference, $30 billion pledged, up to and more than $22 billion is new money. This is a record-breaking time that you can have leaders that can converge in the record time to make commitments of such amount of resources for the smallholder farmers in Africa.
Right. Is the $30 billion the only pledges that we've seen so far at the conference?
Not at all. The leaders wanted to look at some of the fundamental challenges that African smallholder farmers, agribusinesses, stakeholders face. So they knew that it's not just only resources that are stopping agriculture to transform. It's also policies, the investments, and the kind of resources that are required to transform Africa's agriculture. This particular week, we were able to see leaders commit a broad range of issues. Beyond money, they specifically mentioned that they would like to go back and look at how the plans are crafted to respond to the challenges that Africa leaders and Africa stakeholders are facing. Right. They noted that unless we really understand what are the fundamental issues that are constraining smallholder farmers to increase their production and productivity, they committed that particular area. And beyond resources, when they make financial pledges, when they make political pledges, they noted, and it's a very, very big commitment, that they created what they call a performance scorecard a scorecard that will be able to measure, track the progress they are making against these commitments. This is fundamental
Some
for
of the
Africa.
things. But I mean, we have to mention that right now the continent is facing a tough time in terms of agriculture. For example, we're seeing El Nino weather patterns damaging crops from South Africa to Ethiopia, as well as Malawi declaring a disaster there as well in terms of agriculture. Now, how does this feature into AGRA's outlook and some of the scorecard that you just mentioned? How is this playing as we go forward in terms of investment and policy in Africa's agriculture sector?
Thank you. At the beginning of this conference, AGRA produced a report called the Africa Status Report, the Agriculture Status Report. And this particular report, a lot of issues were documented, and amongst them was how do you cope with some of the challenges that are unplanned for, including weather challenges, whether El Nino or La Nino, too much rains or too little rains, droughts and things like those. Because it's not the first time such a thing is happening in Africa. So the intention of such a report and such a conference and what AGRA has been doing is how do you prepare households, farming households, to be able to cope with such a kind of challenges that are able to get them in a situation they are not able. How do you make sure that you invest in the right seeds and fertilizers that they can withstand drought, that can be able to have extra grains stored, that in the event of scarcity like these ones, they are able to resort to the kind of harvest they have made before. Surpluses in some of the seasons, deficit in some of the seasons. So the report, and not only the report, but the work that we are investing in the coming years, is to make sure that the households are made what we call resilient. They are able to withstand shocks when it comes and they are hit like this. Because it's not the first time it's happening in Africa.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you so much for joining us in the studio and giving us your insight.
Thank
you.
Of
course, Mr. Kezira Boaz, the Head of Policy and Advocacy at AGRA, joining us.